Hello. It's finally time I speak my truth. No more holding back. No more dancing around your questions. No more half answers. I owe you this, and I know it's long overdue. For so long I've carried these words inside me, rehearsing them in my mind, wondering how I could ever explain everything without breaking your heart even more. But the silence between us has already done enough damage. The distance, the confusion, the unanswered questions, they've created a weight that neither of us deserves to keep carrying. I know you've been quietly waiting for clarity. You may not have said it out loud every day, but I felt it in the spaces between your words. I felt it in the way you slowly stopped asking certain questions. I felt it in the moments when you tried to act strong, even though I could sense the hurt behind your calm voice. You deserved honesty a long time ago, and I regret that it took me this long to finally gather the courage to give it to you. I can only imagine the thoughts that must have crossed your mind during this time. Maybe you wondered if I ever truly loved you. Maybe you thought you were just someone temporary in my life, someone I kept around while I sorted out my real life somewhere else. Maybe you questioned whether I had been living some kind of double life, giving pieces of myself to two different people while pretending everything was normal. I know those doubts must have hurt deeply, and for that pain, I am truly sorry. You never deserved to feel like you were an option. You never deserved to feel like you were standing in the background of my life, waiting for a decision that never seemed to come. So let me start with the truth. The reason I didn't leave the third person in my life wasn't about love. It wasn't about passion. It wasn't because they meant more to me than you did. That may sound unbelievable after everything that's happened, but it's the truth. If love alone had been the deciding factor, things would have looked very different a long time ago. Because the truth is, you've had a deeper impact on me than you probably realize. You've occupied a space in my heart and mind that no one else ever managed to reach. You're the person I thought about in quiet moments when the world slowed down. You're the name that echoed in my thoughts late at night, when everything else was silent. Even when I tried to distract myself, even when I tried to convince myself to focus on the life I had already built, somehow my thoughts kept finding their way back to you. But my actions didn't reflect that truth, and that's where I failed you. My silence hurt you. My inability to make a clear decision kept you stuck in uncertainty. I saw the changes in you, even if you tried to hide them. I noticed when your hopeful tone slowly turned into quiet acceptance. I felt the moment when you stopped asking me if I would ever come back. I could sense when your heart began protecting itself from the disappointment I kept causing. And every time I noticed that shift, something inside me felt heavier. I hated knowing that I was the reason the light in your eyes had dimmed. So why did I stay where I was? The answer isn't simple, but I will try to explain it as honestly as I can. The third person in my life didn't enter it with romance or passion in the beginning. What they offered me was something different, something that, at the time, felt incredibly important. They offered stability. They offered security. They offered the idea of a life that felt predictable and safe. At that point in my life, I was going through an internal storm that very few people understood. I was carrying wounds from the past, fears about the future, and a constant pressure to hold everything together, even when I felt like I was falling apart inside. I was tired of rebuilding myself over and over again. I was exhausted from feeling like the ground beneath my feet could disappear at any moment. And when you're in that kind of emotional state, the promise of stability can feel like a lifeline. They told me they would help me keep my life together. They promised that I wouldn't have to face everything alone. They made it seem like if I stayed with them, the chaos in my life would finally settle down. For someone who was emotionally vulnerable and afraid of losing everything, that promise felt powerful. So I held onto it. But over time, something changed. What once felt like support slowly started to feel different. The stability I had clung to began to feel more like a cage. Instead of growing, I found myself shrinking. Instead of healing, I felt like I was becoming a smaller version of myself, someone who was simply existing rather than truly living. Yet I stayed, not because it made me happy, but because it felt familiar. Because leaving meant stepping into uncertainty again, and I was terrified of facing another collapse in my life. Then you came into my world, and everything shifted. You didn't offer me the same kind of safety that the other person did. You didn't promise a carefully structured life where nothing would ever go wrong. Instead, you offered something far more powerful and far more frightening at the same time. You offered truth. You saw me in a way that no one else had. When you looked at me, it felt like you could see past the walls I had spent years building. You didn't accept the surface version of me that I showed the world. Somehow, you recognized the deeper parts of my soul that I had tried to hide. Being around you made me feel alive again. But it also scared me, because loving you meant facing my fears instead of hiding from them. It meant letting go of the structure that had been holding my life together, even if that structure wasn't truly making me happy. It meant choosing uncertainty in the name of authenticity. And I wasn't brave enough at first. I wish I could tell you that the moment I realized how special you were, I immediately made the right choice. I wish I could say that I walked away from everything else without hesitation. But that wouldn't be honest. The truth is, I stayed stuck between two worlds. One world represented safety, familiarity, and the life I thought I needed in order to survive. The other world represented love, truth, and the possibility of becoming the person I was meant to be. Instead of choosing one path, I hesitated, and that hesitation hurt everyone involved. I want you to understand something very important. I never kept you in my life just to fill a void. I never reached out to you for attention or validation. What I felt, and still feel, for you is genuine. It's real in a way that's difficult to explain. You were never a backup plan. You were the person my heart quietly longed for even when my mind tried to ignore those feelings. But love cannot survive forever in confusion. And that's exactly what I created for you. I left you in a place where you didn't know whether to keep believing in us or finally let go. No one deserves to live in that kind of emotional limbo. Looking back now, I can see how unfair that was to you. I can see how my fear turned into your suffering. And that realization is something I carry with deep regret. For a long time, I convinced myself that staying with the third person was the responsible choice. I told myself that leaving would create too much chaos. I believed that the life they promised me would eventually feel right again. But slowly, that illusion started fading. The future I had imagined with them stopped feeling real. The promises that once sounded comforting began to feel empty. And the stability I had been clinging to started looking more like an anchor that was preventing me from moving forward. Eventually, I had to face a difficult truth. I had been holding on to something that no longer existed. The lifeline I thought was keeping me safe had already begun to unravel. The security I believed in had become a story I was telling myself out of fear. And when I finally allowed myself to admit that, another truth became impossible to ignore. My heart kept returning to you. You were never just a passing chapter in my life. You weren't a distraction or a temporary feeling. You were the person who awakened something inside me that had been asleep for years. You reminded me what it feels like to want love, not because it's comfortable, but because it's real. Now I stand here emotionally exposed, stripped of the excuses and illusions that once kept me stuck. And I have to ask myself a question I avoided for too long. What if the thing I've been most afraid of Letting go and falling is exactly what I need in order to be free. And what if you were never a detour in my life's path, but the destination I was meant to reach all along? I don't know where you are emotionally right now. I don't know if you still think about me the way you once did. I don't know if your heart still holds space for the possibility of us. Maybe you've moved forward. Maybe you've started building a life where the pain I caused is finally fading into the past. If that's the case, I will respect that completely. You deserve peace. You deserve someone who chooses you fully, without hesitation or confusion. But if there is even the smallest part of your heart that is still open to me, I want you to know that I am ready to choose differently now. Not as the confused person I once was. Not as someone who was too afraid to take a risk for love, but as someone who has finally understood what truly matters. I know words alone can't repair everything that has been broken. Trust isn't something that magically reappears overnight. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes consistent actions that prove those words are real. If there is still a bridge between us, even a fragile one, I'm willing to cross it step by step. Because this time, I am not choosing comfort. I am choosing truth. Before I finish, I need to say one more thing. You were never too much. Your love was never overwhelming or unreasonable. You weren't wrong for believing that something deep and meaningful existed between us. You weren't imagining it. What we shared was real. It still is. The only thing that was missing was my courage to meet that love with the same level of commitment. Now, whatever happens next, I will carry the lessons you gave me for the rest of my life, knowing you changed me in ways I never expected. Loving you forced me to confront the parts of myself that I had been avoiding for years. You helped me remember who I truly am. So if our paths cross again, I hope it will be as two people who have both grown stronger from everything we went through. And if they don't, then please know this. Your love was never wasted. It was the light that guided me out of one of the darkest chapters of my life. You were the lantern that showed me the way when I couldn't see clearly on my own. And because of that, a part of my heart will always belong to the truth we shared.